Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with a very special episode of the Frigate Pilot's Manifesto, the series that aims to teach you everything you'll need to know to become a dedicated frigate pilot in EVE Echoes. Now today's video is on the Dramiel, and I know this is a long overdue video. A lot of you have been commenting on various different of the Frigate Pilot Manifesto videos saying, hey Benzie, you say the Dramiel is one of your favourite ships, when are you actually going to cover that again, because you've not really mentioned it? And there's a very good reason for that. Ultimately the Dramiel has it's always been my favourite ship in how it looks, in how it flies, and how it operates. Unfortunately, in EVE Echoes here, I found it really underwhelming, and I was struggling to find an actual place for this where I could talk about it in a remotely positive way. Ultimately, I was finding that if you wanted dedicated PvE in a faction frigate, you were going to get better results with the Worm. If you wanted dedicated PvP, then the Crew War was a better option. And if you wanted something that kind of fit the middle grounds, the Daredevil and the Succubus just kind of did things better than the Dramiel. So, now that I've had access to Fulmination, I've been sitting there blowing up more Dramiels than I care to admit, really trying out a ton of different fittings, pushing this thing to the limit, talking to different folks in the Angel Cartel, in Void Alliance, anyone I know who pilots a Dramiel. I've basically been getting a load of information from, chatting to, trying out different fits and pushing them all to their absolute extremes, so that now I feel that I can actually talk about the Dramiel in a positive way, because hoo boy, have I actually managed to get this into a position where it has now returned to being my favourite overall faction frigate, and I'm so happy to finally be able to say that. So, in today's video, we're going to do a deep dive onto the Dramiel. We're going to have a look at its stats, its attributes, its skill bonuses, all that kind of thing, and we're going to talk about what that means, throw that together into a couple of different fittings, which I'll then showcase at the end as to why I have fallen back in love with the Dramiel, and why I am thoroughly enjoying flying this ship again. Now I am going to be jumping backward and forward here between Fulmination and the live server, simply because of having access to certain modules, etc. that I just haven't had the ISK for on live, just to showcase this at the absolute pinnacle of its abilities, using the stuff that you can fit on live. Anyway, if you do enjoy this video, let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell to never miss an upload, and of course let me know in the comment section down below what ships, what topics you want me to cover in future content. If you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, I do have a Patreon. I'm currently in the process of updating that and sorting out some new perks, etc. And we have a Redbubble merchandise store, so if you've ever fancied representing the Angel Cartel, the Angel Academy, etc. on something like hoodies, t-shirts, laptop skins, stickers, water bottles, that kind of stuff, do head over, take a look, and see if there's anything you fancy. Anyway folks, that all said and done, at long last, let's jump in and talk about the Angel Cartel Dramiel. The Angel Cartel are one of the 5 pirate factions available in EVE Echoes, conveniently here grouped up on the right-hand side of the select faction screen alongside the other 4, the Blood Raider Covenant, the Spentis Corporation, Guristas Pirates, and Sanchez Nation. Now the Angel Cartel themselves are based out of the region of Curse. That means you cannot claim sovereignty in Curse, and if you are looking to find Angel Cartel anomalies, Curse is probably a good place to start. That said, you can find them anywhere in the galactic southeast, so regions like Innsmother, Great Wildlands, Wicked Creek, Cache, Deterid, these are all Angel Cartel hideouts, places where you'll find those anomalies. Now if you are going through those areas, you may find an Angel Cartel Dead Space anomaly. If you complete that Dead Space anomaly with some friends, hopefully amongst the wreckage you will be able to claim some Angel Cartel debris. That debris can then be used to reverse engineer the blueprints for the Macariel, the Cinnabal, and the Dramiel. Now, as an organisation, the Angel Cartel are essentially a close similarity to our Italian mob mafia. They're very family-orientated. If you're part of the cartel, you're part of the family, and they will do whatever they can to look out for you. Now, they have their fingers in pretty much every pie you can think of, whether it's smuggling illicit goods, whether it's arms dealing, whether it's slave trading, prostitution, gambling, you name it, the Angel Cartel probably has a finger in it, and that means that if you're working for the cartel, awesome, you're well protected, and you're probably getting a fairly decent paycheck, but chances are you are addicted and in deep when it comes to one of those vices. So yeah, awesome, you get an excellent paycheck for all that arms dealing you're doing, but you then immediately spend it on the drugs, or prostitution, or gambling, or whatever the heck else the Angel Cartel have over you, and no one leaves the cartel. If you're part of the cartel, you're with them for life. Not a very friendly bunch of guys, but Historically, they have actually taken over entire systems of the Minmatar Republic. Back before the Empyrean Age, when the Minmatar Republic was a lot weaker and more pathetic than it is now, the entire Scarcon system actually defected from the Republic and joined the Angel Cartel, which is really quite surprising. Can you imagine your government being so bad that people actually sit there and say, actually, we'd rather live with the Mafia? Anyway, let's actually then have a look at the Dramiel itself. Now the Dramiel, I love this ship. I love the sort of the horns, the curves to this thing. It is a vicious looking ship. This is an aggressive looking ship in any way, shape or form. I love those angular bits to it, the propulsion units at the back. Everything about the Dramiel to me just screams badass, and oh, I love it. Anyway, attributes and fittings. So the Dramiel itself follows that typical fitting profile for any of the faction frigates. We've got 3 high slots, 3 mid slots, 3 low slots, 3 combat rigs, and 3 engineering rigs. That gives us a decent amount of versatility in regards to what we choose to fit. Then the power grid itself, 61 megawatts. Again, that's large enough that we don't really worry about what we want to fit in there, but it's not so large that we can start fitting things like large Nosferatus or oversized modules of any other kind. Basically, it's a nice amount of power grid without being excessive. Defensively speaking, though, the Dramiel is a little bit more on the fragile side, 4,103, though interestingly, this is spread evenly between shield and armour. Both are 1,156, and structure at 1,023 isn't far behind. Also, if you look at the shield and armour resistances, you'll see that they're fairly similar. Whereas shield has 10% electromagnetic resistance and 50% explosive, armor has 50% electromagnetic and 10% explosive. They kind of swap around, and the same is true for the thermal and kinetic, 20 and 40 compared to 35 and 25. So you'll see that both of those are very similar in their actual resistances and numbers. Now this combined with that fitting profile means you can actually fit the Dramiel in all kinds of different ways. I've seen the Dramiel shield tanked when it's going up against something like Galente or Minmatar anomalies, with something like shield boosters and adaptive invulnerability fields, and I've seen it tanked with dual armor reps as well if you're going up against something like a Mar Empire, or heck, even some of the Galente encounters. You go with that full armor reps, 2 armor reps going there, helps keep you alive. Now, I'm not normally a big fan of armor tanking, as I'm sure you're aware from recent videos, and I do usually recommend shield tanking, but the Dramiel can actually pull that off if you're going up against the right encounters, at which point the dual armor reps there on the Dramiel going up against something like Blood Raided Dead Spaces, very, very useful. Now, interestingly, talking about shield tanking as well, the Dramiel has a fairly sizable capacitor bank, 639 gigajoules as standard, with a maximum capacitor recharge rate of 6.6 gigajoules per second. That is enough that shield tanking this thing doesn't cost you all that much. With the right skills, you can actually maintain capacitor stability with a small shield booster and an adaptive invulnerability field, both running alongside your propulsion system of choice, which makes, again, the Dramiel nice and versatile. As we go down a little bit further, you'll see we've got a signature radius here of 20.6 meters. That is absolutely tiny. That is smaller than the capsule that is inside the Dramiel. And I know a lot of people say, how can that be? Well, remember, signature radius isn't the size of the ship, it's how big it appears to other ships' scanners. So I imagine that the capsule either is just, it is what it is, or it has sort of like a radius, a radiological signature, like the radiation leaking from it, or in fact it could just be markers on it that help it be identified and collected by friendly ships if needs be, whereas the Dramiel, I imagine, has the complete opposite and has sensor dampeners and cloaking technology built into the hull to give it a very small signature radius, the idea being that it doesn't really show up very well on opponents' scanning systems. It makes it very hard to hit. Obviously then combine that with the flight velocity here of 477 meters per second, and you get one heck of a powerful speed tank. Now, an interesting aside here, if we look at that signature radius and that flight velocity, we compare that then with the fact that this is a cannon ship. This means that if you're going up against something like a crew war, the Dramiel is probably the one of the one faction frigate that can stand against the crew war. That signature radius and the flight velocity, even without a propulsion system, means that you can actually speed tank fairly efficiently against something like a crew war, especially if you imagine that the crew war has flattened your capacitor, you're still able to speed tank without your afterburner active, and your cannons are still going to run as well because they don't require an activation cost, whereas obviously the Succubus, the Daredevil, the weapons get switched off, the propulsion system gets switched off, as does any tanking, whereas the Dramiel, if you've gone for the the damage control unit, for example, you're going to be able to tank with very low capacitor with your afterburner switched off and with your weapons still firing. Now, if we look at the trait descriptions here for the Dramiel as well, you'll see we've got a roll bonus, the Angel Cartel roll bonus of 50% increase to warp speed and warp acceleration. This means that that warp speed here of 5.0 astronomical units per second is actually 7.5 astronomical units per second, and we can achieve that much quicker than other ships would. Now, if you're in high sec, you're getting that 100% bonus to your warp speed. That means you're actually going to be moving at 15 astronomical units per second. This makes the Dramiel excellent for encounter running, as once you've finished an encounter, you can get to the next one in seconds, rather than it taking minutes to jump from system to system to system and get there. Now, remember I was talking about fighting a crew and using a damage control unit? Well, here on the Dramiel, you can see actually you get a bonus to that as well. Damage control activation time plus 5 seconds. Now, whilst that doesn't sound much in the long run, count out how long 18 seconds actually is, and imagine that for that duration, your ship is taking almost no damage whatsoever, especially against something like a crew if it's now shooting your armor. So when I take a Dramiel up against a crew, I like to sit there and let it. I'll sit there, activate the cannons, orbit it nice and closely, sit there and watch the crew switch off my capacitor. My afterburner turns off, but I still manage to speed tank thanks to being about 800 meters per second. Even without the afterburner, I'm still hitting with the cannons because they don't use any capacitor either, and then I activate the damage control unit just as I hit armor, and suddenly that crew is doing nothing to me and I'm ripping through it. The only disadvantage is that crew can probably disengage by just sort of turning away, because obviously I won't have enough capacitor to have a warp scrambler or a warp disruptor active until they turn to run away and turn off all their neutralizers and that kind of thing, and you can sometimes catch them in the fleet. Now, talking about those cannons as well, how they rip things apart, here you can see that like every other faction frigate, we get bonuses from Advanced Frigate Command and Advanced Weapon Operation, in this case Advanced Small Cannons. A small cannon operation there gives us 10% increased small cannon damage and a 5% reduction to small cannon activation time. That's a 50% increase to the damage that your cannons kick out and a 25% reduction to their activation speed. So that's faster firing cannons that do more damage. This actively gives you basically the equivalent of 6 turrets worth of damage, and that is a lot of cannon power to kick out, as you'll see later on. Now, Advanced Frigate Command, normally this gives you some interesting bonuses like afterburner speed or that kind of thing. Here on the Dramiel, it's straight up more stuff for your cannons. Small cannon tracking speed and small cannon accuracy fall off. 50% additional small cannon accuracy fall off means that already gentle and gradual accuracy fall off of small autocannons becomes even more gradual and gentle, to the point that 5 kilometers is still about 90% DPS, and a 7.5% increase to small cannon tracking speed means that when you're orbiting at a ridiculous speed around someone, your angular velocity isn't impacting on how well you can apply damage to your target. Remember, angular velocity, due to symmetry of angles, works both ways. If you've got an angular velocity of 0.9 radians per second, that means your target is operating at 0.9 radians per second back at you, which means you can be quite difficult to hit yourself, but makes your own turrets difficult to hit. Important point to note if you're using some of the slower tracking turrets, why you may not want to orbit. If you're using something like large rifled railguns, for example, activating orbit is probably not a good idea. Sitting still is probably a better idea, because you're going to have a lower angular velocity relative to your target, which means they have a lower angular velocity relative to you. Now, what this all means when you combine this together is that you get a nice versatile ship in regards to the Dramiel that can be shield tanked, it can be armor tanked, it can be speed tanked. There's all kinds of different stuff you can do there. You can have fun with the mid slots in all kinds of different ways too, and it is definitely a cannon ship that is quick to relocate. This makes for an absolutely astonishing encounter runner, capable of clearing encounters quickly and then moving on to the next one in a matter of seconds rather than minutes. And here we have it at long last, the Dramiel fit that has finally renewed my love for this ship. Ultimately, I had an idea of what I wanted to achieve with the Dramiel beforehand, but I was struggling to find a balance between tank and DPS. Either I was finding that the ship was survivable, but it was taking hours to do an encounter, or it was doing good damage, but was so fragile that any damage it took ran the risk of me having to actually disengage from the fight, heal up at a station, and come back out again. both of those naturally were problematic and led me to feel completely underwhelmed by the Dramiel. Along came Inferis. Now Inferis is a member of Void Federation. Him and I were having a chat yesterday about the Dramiel. He's suggested this fit. I spent a day and a half now running through this and trying this out, and I am utterly in love. He solved my problem with one simple module, which we'll come to in a moment, so thank you so much Inferis for making this video possible. Now for the high slots here, of course this is a Captain Benzie special, up close and personal autocannon brawling build. I love autocannons. Not only do we have a brilliant spread of damage types here, with thermal and kinetic, thermal and explosive with a good amount of kinetic in the middle there as well. This means we are great against armor, but still very good against shields as well, thanks to that thermal damage. Not only that, we have a very high DPS of 167, and some of the best tracking speed in the game here on the Dramiel, thanks to those bonuses, 704. These apply very well to their target, and certainly, even though the downside here, the optimal range 1.5 kilometers, is met with an accuracy fall-off of 10.45. That means if you're sitting anywhere between 3 and 5 kilometers, you're not dropping below 85% effective DPS. That is insanely good, and means that full DPS there of 500.64 is actually sustainable. You can actually keep that on your target. You orbit nicely at 3-4-5 kilometers, you're doing almost your full DPS to that target without getting hit back. It's insane. Now, it's worth me just spending a moment to point out that yes, that 500.64 is based on me being on Fulmination. I have Expert Small Cannon Operation 5, and I have Expert Small Cannon Upgrade 5. But I can tell you from the live server where I'm now running this same fit, I fitted it this morning, my DPS there is 465, so it's only 35 less, despite only having Expert Cannon Operation at 3 and Advanced Small Cannon Upgrade at 4. So I'm missing 6 of the upgrade skills, and I'm missing 2 of the operation skills, and I'm only losing 35 DPS. The rest of this is still perfectly viable. I'm still getting the same navigation, same capacitor, same everything else. It's just a slightly lower DPS. The fitting is much more important than your skill point allocation. Anyway, part of how we're getting that 500.64 is due to having 2 Gistum C-type gyro stabilizers in the low slots, 2 weapon upgrade modules. So obviously these give a damage upgrade, 5% for each of these fitted, although there is a slight penalty on the second one, 5% damage bonus, 4.5% reduction to activation time just for having it fitted. Then you can activate both of these to increase the damage bonus and reduce the activation time adjustment even further. And with both of those active, this ship gets a full DPS of 784.73. That is an insane amount of damage that the Dramiel here can kick out against the target. And remember, it can comfortably apply that to anything and everything. Now for propulsion systems, a Centi C-type small afterburner fits the bill quite nicely. I ran the numbers here comparing a micro warp drive to an afterburner. Of course the micro warp drive gives you some truly insane maximum flight velocities, but it also increases your signature radius. Yeah, okay, the Dramiel has a very small signature radius to start with, and the micro warp drive only increased that to 106 meters, but that is more than enough to outweigh the flight velocity bonus. Because remember, you need to maintain quite a tight orbit. You're not going to be able to actually maintain that full bonus speed. And as an idea, the speed that I got was actually 4,919, so nearly 5,000 meters per second out of this thing. But I wasn't able to actually get that when orbiting. Orbiting, I was only getting about 3,000 meters per second, and obviously with that signature radius being increased by about 500%, meant that, yeah, it's not as good for tanking. Stick with the afterburner. Afterburner is by far what the Dramiel is looking for here, and if your opponent has webs, don't stress too much. You should still be able to tank a load of damage and disengage if needs be, with the afterburner active there and a very small signature radius. Now for the mid slots here, a Predator Warp Scrambler and a Predator Stasis Webifier are our first 2 options. Basically the Warp Scrambler here is useful in PvP. Obviously I can lock a target down there, Warp Jammer strength of 5, very few ships going to be running away from that, whilst I orbit at a nice close angular velocity around them, ripping them apart with autocannons, but it also switches off micro warp drives, which helps with range control. On the other hand as well, we then have the Stasis Webifier, which is dropping our target's flight velocity by 61% and can do so at a range of 14.8 kilometers. Essentially, this is useful for going up against things like interceptors or some of those smaller, faster, more annoying things. In PvP, very useful against drones. If you're not intending to go up against interceptors though, you may find that a target painter actually works as well, if not better, in certain situations. The stasis weber fire though, for me, is preferable, because it just means the one ship that you do really struggle against otherwise is completely under your control here. Target painters otherwise tend to be better for longer ranged weapons. You'll find that if you're using straight cannons, target painters tend to be better than webs, but if you're inside web range, the weber fire tends to be better. Now the third and final of the mid-slots here is a Settler large group shield booster. This was the missing component. This is what I had never considered fitting to a Dramiel and ultimately saved the day for me. What this does, it takes up a mid-slot, it uses almost no power grid to do so, and you can activate it. Okay, yes, it's a nice slow activation of 20 seconds, but 507 shield boost for an 800 gigajoule amount of fuel consumption. So I've got a load of plasmoids in my in the ship hold here. When I activate the large group shield booster here, it repairs about 30% of the Dramiel's shields at a cost of 5 plasmoids, so it's not much at all. The trouble is you can only use it once every 20 seconds, but as you'll see in the combat demonstration in a moment, once every 20 seconds is more than enough, thanks to how you can speed tank. That was the issue I was finding before, that if I went for the full damage and speed tank, my any incidental damage I took ultimately eventually stacked up into something that was unmanageable. Here, the large group shield booster helps you manage that damage, because you can just repair up your shields once every 20 seconds quite comfortably and stay in the fight for even longer. Now, in order to pull this off, the rigs are of course going to be quite expensive, because I've gone for full Mark 3s here, but again, start with Mark 1s or Mark 2s, whatever you can afford, and then just fit over time. Now this starts off with 2 cannon burst aerators and a cannon collision accelerator. Burst aerators are of course very useful, and they make you fire faster, and considering that's exactly what the Dramiel's based on, you're turning your autocannons into even more Gatling guns. 2 of those and 1 collision accelerator is the best way to increase your DPS when flying a Dramiel. On the other side then, for the engineering rigs, I've gone for 2 auxiliary thrusters and a polycarbon engine housing. The polycarbon engine housing just helps me maintain that orbit a little bit nicer, and the auxiliary thrusters there are giving me a standard cold navigation maximum flight velocity here of 882.45 meters per second. So remember we were giving that example earlier with the crew ore switching off your capacitor and everything, so you've got no afterburner. With no afterburner, I'm still moving at 882.45 meters per second, which against a non-moving target, or if the crew ore is barely moving at all, is a radial velocity there, an angular velocity of 0.378 radians per second, which is just insane. That is a really good angular velocity there. Makes us very hard to hit, even without an afterburner active. I cannot stress that enough. The afterburner makes us insanely good, but the standard flight velocity there is enough to speed tank against a lot of ships, even if you have no capacitor. Also, a warp preparation time there of 1.19 seconds is insane. You'll find that nothing can lock onto that. And in fact, I've jumped into dictaspheres before. I've then afterburnered out of that and warped away before I've actually had a successful lock on me properly. The Dramiel is very nimble, very quick to warp, very quick to get in and out of dangerous situations, and that ultimately is why I am thoroughly enjoying this ship right now, because I can do an encounter nice and quickly, and as soon as that encounter's over, it's very quick for me to jump to the next encounter, system to system to system. 8 jumps away is nothing anymore. Get to that encounter, do that one, move on to the next one. Very powerful ISK per hour generation here. Now, whilst it's all very well and good me talking about how good this is, let's actually jump into a T10 storyline encounter to showcase just how well this can actually do things. So I've gone for Sweet Poison here, which is one of the Galente ones, tends to be a little bit cheaper on the market than some of the others, but also drops railguns. Remember, it drops railguns, and railguns are something that a lot of people are after. So I've jumped in here at 30 kilometers range away from things. I lock onto all my targets. I know that I'm going to get the small ones there quite comfortably. We're going to start with that H-2 interceptor, activate the afterburner, set that orbit, which I've set currently at 5 kilometers, 5 kilometer orbit here around the H-2. We're going to put the weber fire on as well once we're in range, and start to blap that ship off the grid nice and quickly. And you can see the amount of damage we're doing is, okay, it's a small target, so we're only getting grazes and things like that, but again, it's a good amount of damage per cycle, and we're then going to move on to the catalyst next there. Obviously, catalysts tend to be the ones in these that have the scramblers on them. Getting rid of scramblers first is always a good idea. But I just want to point out here, look at how quickly those autocannons are cycling as standard. That is how fast they're going before we activate those gyro stabilizers, and also check out my shields. I've barely taken any damage at all here on the approach, on the orbit, taking out those first ships. I've not had to activate that group shield booster yet. You'll see that when I do, get a nice big heal up there. And yeah, it turns out that catalyst does have a scrambler, so we're going to take that one out in probably the next hit or two. And that'll go down, there we go. On to the other Atron 2 Interceptor. Again, we're nice and close, so it's not going to be long before we can start applying the damage comfortably. There we are, through its shields, halfway through its armor. We're going to move down then into its structure, taking no damage here at all, basically. Preparing it to move on to that Myrmidon. There goes the Atron 2 Atron 2 Interceptor. We now have a Myrmidon 2 Guardian, a Thorax Interdictor, and a Hyperion. Obviously, these are going to take a bit of time, and I just love here, if I can angle this through, there I go, just whee through in the distance. See how quickly I'm going across. That's a nice visual representation there of proper angular velocity. And you see I've activated both of my gyro stabilizers here, because I want to do a good amount of damage here to this Myrmidon, kill it as quickly as possible. Not because it's any threat, but just because I want to complete this encounter as quickly as I can. And again, look at how quickly now the autocannons are cycling and the damage they're doing. 1800 damage there, 1800 damage again, 1800 damage per activation, 635 on a glance there. 509, so anywhere between sort of 500 and 1800. That is a big amount of damage for such a small ship to be able to kick out, especially seeing as right now, the Gisty C-type autocannons, I think were like 8-9 million on the market this morning. The gyro stabilizers are only about 30 million. Most of this fitting is actually remarkably cheap for the most part. Dramiels tend to be quite cheap on the market because not many people want to fly them anymore because the Daredevil just isn't far more popular. You can actually you can buy and fit a Dramiel surprisingly cheap compared to a lot of the other faction frigates, and as you can see, we're quite comfortable here doing a Tech 10 storyline encounter. Now obviously I'm not going to just sit here and talk this entire way through the entire thing. I am going to jump ahead in just a moment, but I wanted to showcase how that first wave comes along, and you see we take almost no damage at all, to the point that actually my shields are passively recharging up to 100% now. Gyro stabilizer is about to come back on again, ready for use, but I will take out that Myrmidon first before activating those. Right, so what I'm going to do now is jump ahead on this wave to the end of this one as we go into wave 2. We're coming up to the 10-minute mark now, and we're just about to complete this first wave. Now what you see I've done here is I've actually tapped onto the planet there in the distance. This is something that is, I've basically got myself between the starting point of this encounter and this planet. It's something that is the opposite side of me from the starting point. So as we get the Hyperion about to go down, I'm going to hit approach onto that planet so that I move away from the starting point as quickly as possible. There we go, hit that approach. Still got the afterburner active there. Off we go, and I'm moving towards that point quite quickly. I'm a good 30 to 40 kilometers away from everything. I can lock onto my targets and now comfortably pick and choose what it is I actually want to engage. So again, we've got some Covert Ops Catalysts there, Megathron Striker, Hyperion, Atron 2 Interceptor, Thorax Interdictor, Myrmidon 2 Guardian, all this kind of thing. I can just have a look at those. The Covert Ops Catalyst is probably going to be the first one I want to take care of, because again, these tend to be the ships that are using things like Warp Scramblers and some of the E-War modules. So I've hit my orbit back on that. You can see how quickly I get back into range, thanks to how fast this ship goes. Take almost no damage on the incoming at all. Yep, we've got a stasis web of fire on us here. That means I'm going to take a bit more damage. Might actually get to showcase how the group shield emitter actually works now. But the Corelli Catalyst there, going down. We're halfway through its armor now, working towards structure. Then we're going to take on the Atron 2 whilst we lock onto the next of the catalysts there, because I hit lock onto all. I wasn't selective in what I actually went up against. Cool, so on to the Corelli Atron 2 Interceptor, we'll take that one down, and we've locked onto the other Catalyst Covert Ops. Still, almost no damage being taken here at all in a Tech 10 storyline encounter. Just repeat that, Tech 10 storyline encounter, taking no damage. Down goes that Atron 2 Interceptor, lock onto the next Thorax, and on to the Corelli Catalyst Covert Ops there. Doesn't look like any of these are ones that actually had scramblers. Pretty safe wave in fairness. But again, we're just going to go onto there and rip that one apart quite comfortably, nice and quickly there. It's a frightening amount of damage that this thing can actually kick out against targets, and again, taking almost nothing in return. The fact that we're coming up to like 11-12 minutes into an encounter now, and we're halfway through wave 2 on a T10 storyline encounter, I think makes for an excellent amount of ISK generation per hour. There we go, there goes that one down. We're now just onto one more Atron 2 interceptor, after which it's all the bigger ships. We've got battle cruisers, sorry, a cruiser on the Thorax, battle cruiser from the Myrmidon, and then the Megathron and Hyperion are both battleships. Those pose no threat at all to us whatsoever. Their tracking is absolutely abysmal compared to our flight speed and our speed tank. They're just not going to be able to hit us. So again, I'm going to jump ahead to the end of this wave and see what happens when wave 3 spawns on this one. We're about 25 to 26 minutes into this encounter now, and wave 3 is on the cusp of spawning. I just need to get rid of this Hyperion, and of course that's a Tech 10 battleship. It has tank for days, so it's taking quite a while to go down. Now I am preparing, I've got Devon 8 there highlighted, ready to hit approach on, just so I can get some space between me and the warp-in point. That means when the next wave spawns, hopefully there's a bit of distance between me and the enemy ships, so they don't all spawn around me and just completely screw me all at once. So, we now wait. Hyperion's going to go down in the next hit or so we're going to open up the menu, hover over approach, get ready to tap that as soon as the time's right. Come on. Come on. Next hit, is it going to be, there we go, hit approach and start to move towards that with our afterburner. That just gives me a chance now to actually see the enemy spawn in there, and I'm pulling away at speed, so it gives me a chance to have a look at what we've got. A couple of Hyperions, Megathron Striker, Atron 2 Interceptor, Catalyst Covert Ops, Myrmidon 2 Guardian, a couple of Thorax Interdictors, an Elite Corelli Atron 2 Interceptor, and two Elite Corelli Atron Interceptors. Awesome. So we're going to try and take those on as well. Now, there is quite a few small ships here. Obviously, we're going to go for the closest one first. I'm keeping an eye on those Corelli Catalysts, as those tend to be the ones that use Warp Scramblers. And obviously, in case something goes wrong, I'd rather have the Warp Scramblers gone first. No, it turns out the Corelli Atron 2 Interceptor is one of the Warp Scramblers. There we have actually got a Warp Scrambler on me, 2 Nosferatus, and 4 Sensor Dampeners. And those Sensor Dampeners aren't a worry at all. You'll see how quickly I lock onto the next target. Even with 4 of those Sensor Dampeners applied to me, they just really do nothing in PvE. Now there we go. There goes that Thorax, and we're locked on. Oh wow, that was difficult. Scrambler's gone as well. So onto that Catalyst Covert Ops. I'll try saying that 10 times fast. Corelli Catalyst Covert Ops. Doesn't look like this one's doing anything other than a Stasis Webifier. Obviously, Stasis Webifiers are still something we do want to take care of, as they are going to slow our ship down, and a slower ship means a lower angular velocity. Lower angular velocity means more incoming damage. So there we go, that's that one down. Oh! Taking a bit of a hit here as we go towards that Elite Corelli Atron 2 Interceptor, down to 71 shields. Let's activate the group shield emitter. There we are, we're all the way back up to pretty much 100%. Take a couple of hits and we're just below 90. It amazes me that that group field emitter, for the cost of 5 plasmids every 20 seconds when I activate it, 5 plasmids heals up 30% of my shields. I mean, if you saw that, that was just an insane. I took a good couple of hits of damage and then bam, it's all gone. Pretend it never happened, and that Corelli Atron 2 Interceptor is about to go down. There we go. And onto the Catalyst. Catalyst Covert Ops next on the list. A little bit too far away for that Predator to click on, so now that we're in range, we'll put that one back on. And away we go again. I'm just trying to get rid of those Covert Ops Catalysts, simply because they tend to be the ones that scramble. In this wave, it looks like actually it was the Atron 2 Interceptor that was the scrambler, so these aren't posing that much of a threat. That said, they're still small targets. Small targets having small turrets are able to track me better than the medium and the large turrets, so they are still worth getting rid of, as they're more likely to be able to actually hit me and do damage. Yes, it'll be less damage than the mediums or the larges, but they're actually capable of hitting me. Like, it doesn't matter that there are large and medium turrets around here as well, and yes, they could theoretically do more damage, but they won't, because simply it's just, they're not going to actually hit me. Anyway, we've got an Elite Corelli Megathron there as well, by the looks of things. That's going to be interesting. So we're going to go for the thorax first and start working our way up to that. I don't think the Elite Megathron is actually going to be a particular problem to us. All it's doing is a signal dampener, sensor damps. And again, sensor damps do nothing. So I'm quite happy now just to sit here and slowly orbit these guys, let my shields repair over time, and rip these guys apart. I mean, those autocannons are really doing the work here, which I'm quite enjoying watching. Anyway, so there we go, that's PvE. Certainly you can see here that the Dramiel is pretty good at PvE. I take so little damage for the most part. I kick out an absolutely terrifying amount of DPS. I take no damage, I do high DPS, and most importantly, any damage that I do take, I can repair very, very quickly without even having to touch my capacitor, thanks to that group shield emitter. Anyway, so extra special treat, today we've actually got some PvP footage, so I'm going to jump back across to the live server, and we're going to have a look at that. I've been jumping around Geminate and Vale of the Silent for quite a while now looking for some PvP, and I've been told that there's some folks around here, and yes, I've just stumbled headlong into their gate camp. Awesome, so we're going to lock onto that Cormorant Interdictor first of all, and start orbiting that bad boy. Start with the damage, looks like a stabber's jumped in. Cool, okay. This could get interesting. We've got a Cormorant and a stabber here. That Cormorant itself is taking no damage at all, and oh, we've got a, is that an Imicus Covert Ops? I suppose that's point. Probably going to try and lock onto me and get on with some kind of, like, Warp Disruptor, etc. No, okay. Well, let's go for the Stabber for the time being. It looks like that Imicus is just going to sit and watch for the time being. The Cormorant went down ridiculously quickly. Stabber currently doesn't appear to be doing much. It is locked on. Oh, and yes, we're being fired at by its drone. Oh wow, and the drone is completely missing as well. Looks like that might be a medium drone. We've got a target painter on, and again, not any actual damage coming through from that stabber at this point in time. It has used a shield extender. I have managed to cut through with my autocannons, and I'm going to put the Web of Fire on at this point as well. Just because stabbers do have a surprising amount of flight velocity, so slowing it down just makes it that little bit easier to hit, and I get a few more smashes rather than glances. Anyway, let's swap target to that Covert Ops first of all. He wants to sit and watch, that's fine. Let's take him off the grid nice and quickly. It's not like the stabber's doing anything to us. There we go. Imicus Covert Ops down in what, 2-3 volleys? An H1 Interceptor, oh, and it's gone. I don't think he wanted to stick around long, but this stabber, we've got it scrambled, we've got it webbed, and I'm sitting here just comfortably orbiting around it at the moment, just pulling that down. We're through armor, working our way towards structure. Actually, let's activate those gyro stabilizers and just make this that little bit faster, and try and take this guy. That's an Ashimu. Okay, that's a little bit scary. I've been talking about how a crew war will, will die to a Dramiel, but I'm not sure I'm ready to try it with an Ashimu. Oh! There goes my capacitor. Oh, but I've activated warp. It's okay. It's okay. We're safe. My capacitor just vanished. Okay, yeah, I can still speed tank fairly effectively without that. I don't need propulsion systems, and I can sit there with my my autocannon still firing as well. And I mean, heck, look, the capacitor does recharge fairly quickly, but whoa, that flattened out quickly. But there we are, one Dramiel versus an entire gate camp completed. No trouble at all, no damage hardly at all to my shields. In fact, the anomaly I jumped into did more damage to me. And there we have it, everything that I wanted to tell you guys about the Dramiel and my newfound returning love for it. Crikey, I have missed flying this ship. It's just been so disappointing until now figuring out finally how to get this thing to work on a pretty epic level. I love the fact that this thing can take out T10 storylines on its own quite comfortably. I love the fact that I can take out gate camps, and I love the fact that I've taken out crew wars on the test server with it as well. I'm not going to say this is the best at PvE or PvP as far as the faction frigates go, but it's certainly fun, and I do thoroughly enjoy flying the Dramiel. I love how this ship looks. It's great for me, I think, just to be able to get back into this thing and have some fun in my favourite ship. It's been quite disheartening not being able to fly it. So let me know what your favourite faction frigate is. It's been a while since I did a Frigate Pilot Manifesto. Of course, let me know which ship you'd like to see me cover or what topic you'd like to see me cover in the next one in the comment section below. Otherwise folks, thank you for watching all the way to the end, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!